It is AD 192, and Rome trembles beneath its own applause. The Colosseum stands like a god of stone, colossal, pitiless, eternal. Its arches glare down upon a sea of faces, 100,000 souls pressed together in hunger and awe. The sun burns high above, bleeding gold across the marble terraces, and the air is thick with dust, sweat, and the metallic sting of blood. You hear the roar before you see it, that low, living thunder that rolls through the bones of the empire. It is not the cry of joy, but of frenzy. Drums pound from the shadows beneath the stands, slow, deliberate, ritualistic. Each beat feels like a heartbeat the city cannot control. The smell is overwhelming. Iron, oil, and flesh. The scent of men and beasts, and the dying mingled with incense meant to mask it. But the perfume only makes it worse. You can see them, the lions pacing behind their iron gates, muscles rippling beneath tawny hides. Their claws scrape against the wood. Their eyes burn with the same fever that has seized the crowd above. Dust rises in shimmering clouds across the arena floor where sand and blood have become one. And then the sound changes. A hush falls, not of peace, but of reverence. The gates at the far end of the arena creak open, and from the darkened corridor beyond comes the flash of gold. He appears, the emperor, the god, the madman, Commodus. He strides into the light wearing golden armor that glitters like molten sunlight. His face is painted with oil, his curls perfectly arranged beneath a lionskin helm. Around his neck hangs a garland of laurels, a parody of divinity. In his right hand, a sword of silver. In his left, a club, the weapon of Hercules. He walks as if the world itself is his reflection. The crowd erupts, not with joy, but with fear. You can feel it in the way the sound cracks, uneven, trembling. The senators in the front rows rise reluctantly, their lips forming hollow cheers, while their eyes stay fixed on the ground. The soldiers beat their spears against the stone, not out of loyalty, but survival. Commodus raises his arms and tilts his head toward the blazing sun. His voice rises above the wind, echoing through the marble and dust. I am Hercules reborn. I am the god of Rome made flesh. The words hang in the air like smoke. The crowd answers with thunderous applause because they must, because silence in Rome is treason. You watch as he steps closer to the center of the arena. His shadow stretches long and dark across the sand, falling over the man kneeling before him, a gladiator stripped of his weapons, his head bowed in trembling submission. Commodus circles him slowly. There is no sound now but the soft crunch of sandals on sand and the distant roar of a caged lion. The emperor's smile never fades. He leans down, as though to whisper forgiveness. The crowd holds its breath. Then, in a blur of motion, the blade flashes, one clean, effortless stroke. The man's body collapses before he even understands he's been struck. The head rolls into the dust, blood soaking into the earth like wine poured for the gods. For a heartbeat, there is silence. Then the drums return, faster, harsher, pounding in time with the crowd shouts. Ave Commodus! Ave Deus! You feel it now, the sickness spreading through the air, the delirium of obedience. The empire that once built roads and libraries, temples and laws, now kneels to blood and sand. Commodus stands over the corpse, breathing in the stench of death like incense. His sword drips red as he raises it toward the imperial box above him. Senators bow their heads. Women faint. The emperor laughs, not the laugh of joy, but of ownership. He wipes the blood from his blade with his bare hand and smears it across his chest. The crowd erupts again, desperate to please the god who might destroy them. You see it now, Rome's heart beating in terror, its greatness rotting beneath the weight of spectacle. The empire that once worshipped gods now worships a man who believes he is one. The drums stop. The echo lingers. And for a moment, all that remains is the sound of flies circling the body in the sand. If cruelty disguised as glory no longer shocks you, then perhaps Rome never fell. It simply changed its name. Subscribe to Tale of History, and don't look away. This is AD 161, and Rome glitters beneath a pale dawn, the kind that makes marble glow like bone. The empire is at its height, swollen with conquest, gilded with peace, ruled by a man the world calls a philosopher. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who writes of virtue in candlelight while commanding legions at the edge of the world. His words, calm, measured, divine, are carved into the heart of the empire itself. But even gods grow weary, and in the shadows of his wisdom, a child stirs. You can hear the boy before you see him, laughter echoing through marble halls, a bright, sharp sound that feels somehow wrong inside these sacred walls. He is beautiful, the kind of beauty that draws the eye and never lets it go. Golden curls, wide eyes, the delicate arrogance of someone born to rule, before he can understand what ruling means. Commodus. He is 8 years old, and already the empire bends itself around him. Servants rush when he moves. Senators bow when he speaks. He walks the corridors of the Palatine like a god in training, his small hand tracing the same columns that once bore the weight of emperors. His father watches him from a distance, as philosophers do. Marcus Aurelius believes that virtue can be taught, that reason can overcome desire, that even power can be tamed by discipline. But the boy before him does not listen. He mimics his father's words, not their meaning. When Marcus writes in his journals, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one," his son interrupts, asking when he will wear the purple robe. When he speaks of humility, Commodus asks why the gods should kneel to men. Even as a child, his eyes are cold. The palace servants whisper that the boy delights in strange games, ordering his playmates to fight as gladiators, naming himself judge and executioner. When one refuses, Commodus strikes him with a toy sword and says, "Then die like a coward." No one laughs. At night, he stands before the statues of the gods, staring at them for hours. The nursemaids say they once found him speaking softly to the marble face of Hercules, asking if the gods felt pain when they were born. Marcus dismisses it as imagination, but others see something darker. The boy is not cruel, not yet, but cruelty is learning to speak through him. He begins to demand new titles. Prince, he says, is not enough. He wants to be called Dominus, God, the new son of Rome. His tutors object, once. The next day, one is found beaten and bruised, his teeth shattered. The boy denies it with a smile too calm to believe. Rome begins to whisper. It always whispers. How could virtue breed madness? How could the philosopher's son be so unlike his father? What curse runs in the blood of emperors? Marcus hears the murmurs, but his faith blinds him. He believes in destiny, in reason, in the idea that the gods do not give monsters to wise men. He writes more and speaks less. His stoicism becomes prayer. The boy grows older, and the world begins to bend around his will. At 14, he demands to watch executions from the tribunal, insisting that an emperor must know what death looks like. He doesn't flinch. When the condemned man begs for mercy, Commodus tilts his head and says, "Mercy is for equals." The guards say that after the blade falls, he does not turn away. He only studies the blood pooling beneath the body, as if he's trying to understand its color. In the gardens of the palace, he practices swordplay against invisible enemies. Each swing is perfect, precise, rehearsed. His instructors praise him. But when they applaud, he stops mid-motion and says, "You clap for skill. One day, you'll clap because you fear me." Marcus tries to guide him still, writing treatises on patience, self-control, duty. He speaks to his son, not as a ruler, but as a man trying to save a soul already half lost. Power, he tells him, is a test of restraint. Commodus answers without hesitation. And restraint is weakness. In AD 176, at the age of 15, the Senate declares him co-emperor. The city rejoices, but beneath the celebration, unease ripples like a fever. The people remember Caligula, Nero, the gods in human form, who burned what they could not control. And as they watch the young prince ride through the streets of Rome in golden armor, waving to the crowds with a smile too perfect, too rehearsed, they wonder if they are seeing history repeat itself. That night, Marcus Aurelius prays to the gods he claims not to believe in. He asks them to give his son wisdom. They answer with silence. Because the truth has already been written in blood. Rome's virtue will not end in war, but in inheritance. The philosopher's Rome has given birth to its undoing. The child who plays at being God will soon demand worship. And when he does, the empire will kneel, not out of love, but out of fear. If the thought of innocence decaying into madness still chills you, then listen closely. History's monsters were not born in darkness. They were raised in palaces. Subscribe to Tale of History before another empire mistakes divinity for destiny. It is AD 180, and the empire shivers beneath a sky of iron. The northern winds sweep across the Danube, heavy with mist and the scent of decay. The front lines of Germania are hushed, no cheers, no clash of swords, only the sound of a dying empire holding its breath. In the heart of the camp, where the banners of Rome droop with frost, a single tent stands apart. Its walls flutter weakly against the wind, each gust carrying whispers of death through the soldiers' ranks. Within, the air is close, dense with fever and incense. The emperor lies upon a narrow cot. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, the last emperor to believe that reason could rule men's hearts. His eyes, once sharp with thought, are now glazed with exhaustion. His lips move in silence, perhaps still speaking to the gods, or perhaps to no one at all. A bronze oil lamp flickers beside him, its flame shrinking in rhythm with his breath. The shadows on the tent walls sway, doctors, priests, and servants moving softly, afraid even to breathe too loudly in the presence of the dying. Outside, the Danube wind moans like a dirge. The soldiers can sense it, the changing of the world. When this man's heart stops, something greater than a life will end. The flap of the tent stirs. A figure enters, cloaked in fur and arrogance. Commodus, 19 years old, tall, radiant, and restless. The gold of his armor catches the firelight, casting him in the image of a god among mortals, or the parody of one. He smells not of battle or sweat, but of perfume and wine. His hands are clean, too clean. He stands at the foot of the bed, his eyes fixed on the dying man. There is no grief in them, only a strange impatience, as though he is watching not his father, but a clock winding down. Marcus Aurelius opens his eyes. The candlelight glints off the thin film of tears that has settled there. His voice is little more than a rasp, yet it carries the weight of an empire. "My son," he whispers, "do not become the thing you rule." Commodus says nothing. His expression is carved from marble, smooth, flawless, unreadable. He glances toward the bronze cup on the bedside table, half empty, the rim darkened by the emperor's touch. The rumors will come later, that the wine was tainted, that ambition moves quicker than nature. For now, there is only silence. The philosopher king draws one last, trembling breath. His hand reaches toward his son, perhaps in blessing, perhaps in warning. "The throne," he murmurs, "is not power. It is duty." But the boy is already looking past him, to the golden circlet resting on a nearby table. To him, it is not duty. It is inheritance. The emperor exhales softly. The lamp beside him flickers once, twice, then steadies as the flame gutters out. Marcus Aurelius is gone. The tent holds still, frozen in the moment between death and realization. One physician bows his head. Another weeps quietly. Outside, a single horn sounds, echoing across the camp, long, mournful, eternal. Commodus does not bow. He does not cry. He steps forward, lifts the ring from his father's hand, and turns it in the light. The gold glows like fire. His reflection stares back at him. Young, divine, invincible. He slides it onto his own finger. Outside, the wind howls through the trees, bending them until they creak and groan. Somewhere in the darkness, wolves answer. The soldiers feel the shift in the air, an empire turning from virtue to vanity, from wisdom to will. By dawn, the news spreads through the ranks. The emperor is dead. The legionaries kneel in the mud. Some cross themselves. Others stare at the rising sun, knowing what it means. The philosopher's Rome is gone. The age of the thinker, the moralist, the builder, dead in the frost. and in its place rises a god made in man's image, merciless, gilded, and hungry. Later, they will burn the emperor's body on a pyre of cedar and pine. The flames will climb into the gray sky, scattering his ashes over the frozen fields. The men will watch in silence, each one feeling something slip away with the smoke, something that can never be restored. Commodus stands apart, watching the fire devour the body of the man who taught him reason. There is no grief in his eyes, only reflection, the kind that looks inward and finds nothing. When the flames die, he turns away without a word. The philosophers, Rome dies with him, and the boy who calls himself a god steps into the ashes of his father's wisdom. From that night forward, the empire no longer thinks. It obeys. When wisdom dies and vanity takes the throne, chaos is never far behind. Subscribe to Tale of History, or turn away, like Rome did, and watch reason burn beneath the crown. The gates of Rome opened to a storm of sound, trumpets, drums, and the rehearsed joy of a city pretending to rejoice. Petals rained from the rooftops, banners unfurled across the marble streets, and the air was thick with perfume and smoke. From the steps of the temples to the high arches of the forum, the people gathered not to celebrate, but to survive the spectacle. The new emperor rode at the head of the procession, his armor blazing beneath the sun. His face was painted with victory, though he had not earned it. His smile was wide, but empty. Commodus, son of Marcus Aurelius, returned to the city not as a soldier returning from war, but as a god returning to his stage. The crowd chanted his name in uneven rhythm, the sound rising like a prayer and breaking like glass. Mothers lifted their children so they could see the emperor's face. Soldiers struck their shields in forced reverence. And all the while, Commodus rode through them with the poise of an actor, savoring applause he no longer needed to earn. Behind him, the generals of his father's army marched in silence. Men who had bled for the empire now kept their eyes low, knowing that one wrong glance could cost them their lives. The Senate stood waiting at the base of the Capitoline Hill, a sea of old faces that had once advised philosophers, now trembling before a boy who mistook fear for devotion. When Commodus reached them, he did not dismount. He looked down at the senators and said, "The gods bow before me. Why do you hesitate?" A thin laugh passed through the ranks, brittle as frost. The senators bowed lower. Their dignity cracked a little more. Within days of his arrival, the tone of Rome changed. The war in the north, his father's life's work, was ended with a single stroke of his pen. Not in victory, not in honor, but in exhaustion. Commodus declared peace with the barbarians, not out of mercy, but because war was tedious. Rome deserves rest, he told the Senate. What he meant was, I deserve leisure. The legions, disgusted, obeyed. They had fought for a philosopher. Now they served a performer. The generals muttered in their tents that the gods had grown cruel. The Praetorian Guard began to whisper, quiet at first, then louder. The emperor no longer visited the camps or temples. He visited the baths, the banquets, the amphitheaters. He surrounded himself with dancers, flatterers, and lovers who called him divine even as their eyes betrayed contempt. The marble corridors of the palace echoed not with counsel, but with laughter that never reached the heart. His mother, Faustina the Younger, withdrew into silence. His sister, Lucilla, watched him with the weary caution of someone who had seen this madness before in other emperors in darker reigns. They tried to advise him. He silenced them with gifts first, then threats. The blood of gods flows in me, he said. You should be grateful to breathe in its presence. At night, he would walk the halls of the palace alone, speaking to his reflection in the polished bronze mirrors. Servants would hear him whispering to himself, sometimes to his father, sometimes to the gods, sometimes to no one. Rome began to change. The city that had once stood as the heart of order now pulsed with decadence. Senators disappeared. New taxes appeared overnight. Executions were no longer matters of justice, but of boredom. Then came the renaming. He stood before the Senate and declared, "The months of the year are no longer the calendar of mortals. They are mine." He renamed them after himself: Lucius, Aurelius, Aurelius, Commodus, Hercules, Invictus. He even renamed Rome itself: Colonia Commodiana, the city of Commodus. No one protested. They clapped until their palms bled. The old gods were forgotten. The philosopher's Rome, the Rome of reason, discipline, and restraint, had become a theater, its emperor the playwright, the actor, and the executioner. The empire began to rot from within, not through invasion or rebellion, but through decay, slow, fragrant, gilded decay, the kind that smells of wine and roses, that smiles while it kills. Every pillar that had held the empire upright began to crack. The Senate bowed deeper. The generals drifted toward quiet disloyalty. The people learned to cheer for fear of being seen silent. And Commodus, radiant, adored, untouchable, mistook their terror for love. Each night, the lamps of the Palatine Hill glowed over a city that no longer slept, a city that watched its emperor dance on the edge of madness and called it divinity. The philosopher's blood had cooled in the north. Now, the fever began in Rome. When power loses purpose, it begins to eat itself, slowly, beautifully, until nothing remains but the performance. Subscribe to Tale of History before the next empire forgets how to tell when its rulers start to rot. The Colosseum, once the beating heart of Roman glory, now pulses with something darker. Its arches, once proud symbols of empire, have become the ribs of a beast, trembling beneath the weight of its hunger. The crowds still gather, but not for honor, not for triumph. They gather because they must. Because when an emperor demands worship, attendance is survival. Each morning, the sun rises over the arena like an executioner's torch, revealing the stains that can never be scrubbed clean. The smell of iron, of death long buried in sand, clings to every stone. And on those stones walks a man dressed not as a ruler, but as a god drenched in gold and delusion. Commodus, the emperor who would be Hercules, the savior of Rome, who turned its glory into a stage. He descends into the arena not from the imperial box, but through the gladiator's gate, his armor glinting like fire, his skin oiled to gleam beneath the light. The crowd gasps, some in awe, most in terror. They have seen emperors before, but never one who thirsted for applause soaked in blood. He raises his hand, and the drums begin, slow, rhythmic, unending. Each beat vibrates through the marble seats, through the ribs of the spectators, through the soul of Rome itself. Then the cages open. They release not lions or tigers, but men, prisoners, slaves, the crippled, the unwanted, the condemned. Some cannot even lift their weapons. Commodus watches them stumble into the light, his eyes bright with childlike amusement. Rome shall see its God perform, he declares. His voice echoes off the walls like a prayer twisted into a curse. And then he begins the slaughter. He moves with theatrical precision, each strike graceful, rehearsed, perfect. The crowd watches in horror as he cuts down unarmed men who crawl toward him for mercy. He drives his blade through the chest of a cripple who cannot stand, through the throat of a beggar who dares to speak his name. Each scream becomes a hymn, each death a verse in his hymn to himself. When the last body falls, he wipes the blood from his sword and lifts it to the sky. The spectators rise, not to honor him, but to survive him. They clap until their hands ache, their cheers trembling with fear. Those who faint are carried out quietly, their absence unspoken. But the emperor is not finished. He commands the arena to be flooded, not with water, but with a thin river of perfume. Slaves pour jars of oil and rosewater over the sand, the scent rising heavy and sweet. Beneath it, the blood curdles, mixing into a strange, nauseating perfume. Commodus inhales deeply and smiles. Now, he says, Rome smells divine. He steps into the red-tinted puddles, the blood clinging to his feet like a benediction. He orders more victims, dozens, then hundreds, to be brought forth. Some are armed, most are not. Some beg for death, others pray for invisibility. He kills them all. To the Senate, this is blasphemy. To the people, this is survival. To Commodus, it is worship. He calls himself the conqueror of death. the living god of the arena. And the Colosseum, once a monument to Roman might, becomes his temple, a theater of madness where divinity and decay are indistinguishable. Every match is fixed, every victory assured. Those chosen to fight him are told the same thing: die well. One prisoner, desperate and broken, tries to strike back. He lunges, blade trembling, hope flickering like a dying spark. Commodus sidesteps the blow, drives his sword through the man's heart, and laughs as the body falls. "Fool," he says softly, "even courage dies when it faces a god." The audience erupts in terror and awe. No one dares look away. The senators, seated in their marble rows, tremble behind their masks of obedience. Some faint. Others hide their faces in their robes, whispering silent prayers that no one hears. The emperor notices and smiles wider. He begins to demand new games, greater spectacles. He slaughters wild beasts from behind the safety of walls, shooting arrows tipped with gold into the skulls of lions that have been half-starved and chained. He rides into the arena in a chariot drawn by white horses, his chest bare, his sword shining. He forces the crowd to chant his name until their voices crack. When the chants falter, he stops the games and begins the executions. He orders that those who remain seated be dragged into the sand. They are stripped, bound, and executed before the crowd. Their blood seeps into the perfume-soaked earth until the smell of roses is lost to the stench of rot. Every day becomes a ritual of death disguised as entertainment. The empire watches itself unravel in applause. And yet, amid the horror, there is fascination. Commodus has become the embodiment of Rome's disease, beautiful, cruel, unstoppable. He is the mirror in which the empire sees its own decay. At night, when the Colosseum empties and the fires die down, he walks the blood-stained sand alone. The moonlight glints on the pools of red, and he whispers to the silence, "They will remember me forever." But the truth is more haunting. They will remember him not for eternity, but for infamy. He believes himself immortal, but what he has built is a theater of rot, a stage where Rome's soul is torn apart, one applause at a time. Power without fear is mercy. Fear without mercy is madness. Rome does not fall in a single night. It decays quietly, beneath silk, behind marble, in the breath of those too afraid to speak. The empire's heart still beats, but its rhythm has changed. The streets that once echoed with poets and merchants now whisper with the shuffle of boots and the crack of torches. Doors no longer close to keep out the cold, they close to keep out the emperor's men. Commodus has turned the city into his hunting ground. The madness that began in the Colosseum now seeps through every alley, every villa, every marble corridor. He sees enemies in every corner, betrayal in every silence. The games have followed him home, and Rome itself has become the arena. At night, the raids begin. You can hear them before you see them. The heavy rhythm of armored footsteps, the hiss of steel sliding free, the dull thud of fists on wood. Torches flare against plaster walls, their light wild and trembling. Doors splinter. Screams rise, then vanish into the night. The city sleeps with one eye open, listening, counting the footsteps, praying they pass by. The Praetorians storm through homes with orders written in the emperor's own hand, purge the unfaithful. But faith is no longer something you can prove. It is something you survive. A senator is dragged from his bed for hesitating before applause. His wife throws herself before the guards, begging for mercy. They strike her down, too, her blood pooling beside the marble threshold she once crossed in dignity. The neighbors hear it. They say nothing. A servant girl whispers that she saw fear in the emperor's eyes. She is nailed to a door as an example. The Tiber runs red again. Bodies float beneath the bridges, faces bloated, mouths open as if still trying to scream. By dawn, fishermen haul them out silently and burn them on the riverbank. The smoke hangs over the water like a veil of guilt. By decree, every soldier of the imperial guard now wears a lion's skin draped across his armor, a command from Commodus himself. He calls them the claws of Hercules, his divine army. They patrol the streets by torchlight, their shadows crawling up the walls like beasts unleashed. They chant his name as they march, Hercules Dominus, Lord of Rome. Their voices echoing through the forum, into the empty temples, across the silent hills. The senators no longer meet in council. The Senate House stands half empty, its marble floor stained with blood where dissent once stood. When they do gather, they speak in code, their voices trembling. A pause too long, a glance too sharp, and a man vanishes by morning. Commodus reads the lists of the condemned himself. He crosses names out not for mercy, but for whim. Sometimes he sends a message before killing, a golden laurel crown left at the victim's door, the emperor's gift. To receive it is to know you will not see sunrise. Fear becomes the city's new currency. Senators begin to burn their own records, their correspondence, their statues. They erase their names from decrees signed in his honor. Rome, the city of memory, begins to forget itself on purpose. They know what is coming. The purges, the executions, the rewriting of truth. Even the temples stand deserted. The priests, once fat on offerings, now fear to light their fires. Who dares call upon Jupiter when Commodus has declared himself God? And through it all, the emperor watches from his palace, surrounded by mirrors and perfumed air, convinced that every shadow is a plot. His eyes flick from servant to advisor to wall, as if the marble itself conspires against him. He no longer sleeps. He drinks until dawn, his fingers twitching on the hilt of his dagger, muttering about destiny and betrayal. They envy my divinity, he says, pacing between the statues of himself that line the hall. But Rome will love me when it learns fear. He commands new executions daily. Entire families vanish. Slaves disappear by the hundreds. The city grows quieter, emptier. At dusk, the torches are lit across the Palatine Hill, flames burning not in celebration, but in mourning. The people learn to read the night by firelight. If the torches burn red, it means the emperor is in the mood for death. No one looks up anymore. They keep their eyes on the ground, their words buried behind tight lips. Even laughter becomes a danger, too loud, and it sounds like mockery, too soft, and it sounds like conspiracy. Rome, once the voice of civilization, now speaks only in whispers. The philosopher's city, the Rome of debate, of learning, of reason, has become a tomb. A beautiful, breathing tomb lined with gold and dread. The marble still shines. The statues still stand. The fountains still flow. But beneath it all, something unseen is rotting. And from his balcony, Commodus gazes down at the city he has devoured and calls it peace. Power without fear is mercy. Fear without mercy is madness. Rome has chosen the latter. Subscribe to Tale of History before silence becomes the only way civilizations learn to survive. The emperor no longer walks among men. He floats above them, gilded, painted, sanctified by his own madness. The line between man and God has broken. Commodus himself has shattered it. He declares that Hercules, the son of Jupiter, has returned, and that he, Commodus, is that reborn God made flesh. Not metaphor, not symbol, reality. And the empire, once proud of its logic, its law, its order, kneels before him in trembling obedience. From the Palatine Hill, the command goes out across the provinces, from Egypt to Gaul, from Britannia to Syria. Every temple shall bear his image beside that of Jupiter. No prayer shall rise without his name. No sacrifice shall burn unless first dedicated to him. The sculptors are summoned. For weeks the forges blaze. Marble is carved, bronze is cast. Across the empire, thousands of new gods emerge, each with the face of a man who bleeds, who kills, who bathes in fear. In the great temple of Jupiter itself, they raise his likeness shoulder to shoulder with the father of the gods. A mortal stands beside a deity, and the priests bow as if the heavens have consented. The people stare, half in awe, half in terror, and whisper that Rome has gone blind. He calls himself Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. Every letter etched into proclamations, every messenger forced to utter it aloud or die. The Senate Hall becomes theater. Commodus enters not in the robes of an emperor, but the costume of a gladiator. Tunic short, sandals laced high, muscles oiled, blood from a morning kill still dripping from his hands. The senators rise in silence, their faces pale, as the emperor of Rome walks across marble meant for philosophers, leaving red footprints behind. He sits upon his throne, carved from ivory and gold, and smiles as his reflection gleams back at him from the polished floor. Hercules does not answer to mortals, he says softly. Mortals answer to Hercules. He renames the months of a year after himself, replacing the gods and ancestors of Rome with his own name. And when that is not enough, he renames the city itself, Colonia Commodiana, the colony of Commodus. Rome, the eternal city, is no longer the heart of the world. It is now his possession. Coins are minted bearing his image crowned with a lion's mane, club in hand, declaring the invincible Hercules, savior of the world. Messengers spread across the empire, distributing them like holy relics. Even the poor must carry his face in their palms when they pay for bread. In the imperial palace, the transformation is complete. The halls are lined with mirrors, their surfaces flickering under the golden light of oil lamps. Hundreds of reflections of Commodus, each one smiling, each one divine. Every torch burns brighter than it should, multiplying his image until the emperor appears to stand in infinite glory. Walls of gold, ceilings painted with constellations, perfumed smoke curling around columns carved with his victories, half real, half imagined. He dines surrounded by these reflections, laughing as musicians play hymns to his divinity. When servants bow to refill his cup, he sees their trembling hands reflected a dozen times over, reminders of power, of fear, of worship. Madness no longer hides. It wears a crown. One evening, he orders the Senate to convene in his private hall. They enter cautiously, their togas brushing against the marble slick with incense oil. Commodus rises from his seat, not robed, not perfumed, but armored, his chest bare beneath a lion's pelt. A wooden club rests in his hand, the weapon of Hercules. He raises it high and roars, "Behold your God!" The senators bow in silence, their knees scraping the floor. None dare meet his gaze. Then he laughs. "Rome is no longer a republic," he says. "Rome is me." He strides among them, the club tapping gently against their shoulders, their heads. Each touch a reminder that mercy is not divine, only survival. When he passes, they smell the iron tang of blood on his skin, the sweetness of oil and wine mingling with decay. Outside, the city begins to crumble beneath his sanctified madness. Shrines are built not to Jupiter or Mars, but to Commodus himself. Shrines where gladiators bleed in his name, where women weep for forgiveness, where statues of marble flesh are kissed by trembling lips. Those who refuse are crucified along the Via Appia, their bodies burned at dusk to light the road that leads to his glory. He believes himself eternal. He believes Rome can no longer die, because he is Rome. But every empire built upon one man's delusion carries its own pyre within its walls. The people whispered now not of gods, but of ghosts. They say the old gods have fled the city. They say Jupiter's statue wept blood the night Commodus placed his likeness beside it. And still, the emperor's laughter echoes through the marble corridors, bouncing off mirrors, multiplying, a god laughing at his own reflection, unaware that it too will one day shatter. When man names himself God, the world becomes his sacrifice. Subscribe to Tale of History before history repeats its worship. The empire holds its breath. Beneath the golden ceilings of the Palatine Palace, where torches burn through the night and marble floors gleam with reflected light, fear has finally learned to whisper. The Praetorian Guard, once sworn to defend the emperor's life with their own, now speak his name like a curse behind closed doors. Their armor still shines, but their loyalty no longer does. Every corridor echoes with deception. Senators meet in gardens after dusk, speaking in the soft tones of men who fear that even the air has ears. Servants carry trays with lowered eyes, careful not to tremble, careful not to spill, careful not to breathe too loudly. They have seen too much. They have scrubbed the blood of too many innocents from the emperor's floors. In the heart of this gilded labyrinth, the shadow of conspiracy begins to take form. Marcia, Commodus' mistress, confidant, and once his most trusted companion, walks the halls with practiced calm. To others, she is merely the emperor's favored concubine, but behind her eyes, fear coils tight as a drawn bowstring. She has just seen her name on a list. It was written in the emperor's own hand, a scroll of death, inked in madness, naming those who would die before dawn. Senators, officers, servants, friends. And among them, one name she never imagined she'd read, her own. She knows what it means. No one survives the list. That night, while Commodus feasts and boasts before his courtiers, she slips from the hall. Her heart beats against her ribs like a drum of war. In the shadows of the courtyard, she finds two men waiting, Laodius, commander of the Praetorian Guard, and Eclectus, the chamberlain. Both men stand rigid, their faces carved from exhaustion and quiet dread. Laodius is the first to speak. His voice is barely a whisper. It ends tonight. They do not speak Commodus' name. Even here, surrounded by moonlight and silence, it feels dangerous to summon it. Marcia nods. Her hands tremble, but her words do not. He will not see another sunrise. The plan forms swiftly, poison hidden in the emperor's wine, swift and silent. No public spectacle, no blade, just a goblet raised to his own glory, and the empire freed by a single swallow. Inside the palace, the feast continues. Commodus sits reclined upon a couch of purple silk, surrounded by dancers and musicians. He laughs, that same unholy sound that has haunted Rome for years, and raises his cup. Wine spills over the rim, staining the marble red. "Rome lives because I live," he roars, voice echoing through the vaulted chamber. "The gods themselves envy me." His guests laugh, but their eyes betray them. Every cheer sounds like a prayer for survival. Every smile hides a shiver. He boasts that he has slain 1,000 beasts in the arena, that he has conquered death itself. He demands that slaves kneel before him, calling him Hercules, savior, lord of life. Then he grows quieter. His voice softens into a drunken murmur as he gazes into his cup, the reflection of his own face rippling in the wine. "They think they can take my empire from me," he whispers. "But I am Rome. Without me, the world burns." Marcia watches him from across the hall, her pulse steady now. The poison is ready. The cup has already been touched. But fate, as it often does in Rome, hesitates. Commodus sets the cup aside, distracted by a jest, by a dancer's movement, by the flicker of a torchlight. Minutes crawl into eternity. The wine waits dark and deadly, while laughter fills the hall like smoke before a fire. The conspirators stand by, their faces still, their hands hidden in the folds of their robes. They exchange no words. They cannot. In this palace, words can kill faster than blades. Finally, Commodus reaches for the cup. He drinks deeply, wine spilling down his chin, staining his beard. He laughs again, louder now, and for a moment the empire holds its breath. But the laughter does not die. The poison fails to strike quickly. Commodus lives, oblivious, boasting once more that he is eternal, that no man, no god can touch him. Marcia turns away, her jaw clenched. She knows they have only moments before discovery. The plan has begun to crumble. Laodius and Eclectus move closer. Their eyes meet, the silent understanding of men who have crossed the threshold of no return. In the flickering light, the emperor stretches out upon his couch, smiling, humming to himself. He calls for another bath. "Even Hercules must cleanse himself," he says. And as his attendants move to obey, the three conspirators follow, shadows among the servants. The bathhouse awaits, steam curling through marble pillars, the scent of oil and incense heavy in the air. The hour of gods and monsters has come. Power without fear is mercy. Fear without mercy is madness. Subscribe to Tale of History, where we remember the moment Rome forgot the difference. It is New Year's Eve, AD 192. The last night of Rome's golden empire begins not with battle, but with a feast. The palace glows beneath 1,000 torches, each flame shivering against walls of marble veined like the flesh of giants. Music drifts through the corridors, flutes, lyres, and hollow drums, their echoes swallowed by the heavy air. Servants move like ghosts, silent and pale, their eyes cast downward. Beyond the great bronze doors, the emperor dines alone. The tables are covered in gold, the air thick with roasted meat, honeyed wine, and fear. Dancers move before him, their painted smiles stiff as masks, their bare feet tracing circles on the marble. A ritual of exhaustion, not joy. The god of Rome watches from his couch, his face gleaming with sweat and wine. Commodus reclines beneath banners of crimson and purple, his head crowned not with laurel, but a lion's mane. The smell of perfume cannot hide the scent of blood on his skin. In his right hand, a golden goblet. In his left, the empire's fate. He laughs between gulps of wine, talking to himself more than to the trembling servants who serve him. Tomorrow, he says, Rome will wake reborn. The new year, the year of Commodus. I will begin it with blood. I will slay 100 gladiators at dawn, and the world will know that gods never age. His words hang in the air like a curse. From the shadows, Marcia watches, her face serene, her hand steady, her heart breaking beneath the calm. The goblet she holds glitters in the firelight. Within it, the dark red wine ripples, rich, sweet, and silent. The poison floats invisible, its bitterness masked by the scent of crushed pomegranate. She approaches. The dancers bow and scatter. The emperor looks up, his expression softening for the only person he ever pretended to love. My Marcia, he murmurs, reaching for the cup. You alone are faithful. She kneels and offers it to him. To your glory, my lord, she says. He takes the goblet, smiling like a child offered praise. The torches flicker. Music fades. Only the slow hum of the distant fountains remains. He drinks deeply. Once. Twice. He laughs. And then the laughter dies. The cup slips from his fingers and strikes the marble with a hollow ring. Commodus blinks, confused. His lips move, but no sound comes. His body sways, a golden statue beginning to crack. He clutches at his chest, at his throat, at the air itself. Then, with a low groan, he stumbles to his feet and staggers from the hall, dragging the lion's pelt behind him like a shadow. Marcia steps back, her hands clasped. She does not follow. She cannot. Through the corridors, the emperor's voice echoes, a guttural cry of confusion and fury. He calls for his guards, for his servants, for his gods. No one answers. The slaves retreat into darkness. The courtiers close their doors. He reaches his chamber, the bath already drawn, steam rising in silver threads. He collapses beside it, gasping, clawing at his throat. He tries to vomit, to purge the poison, to command his own body as he once commanded legions. But the gods he claimed have abandoned him. His strength falters. He crawls into the bath, half delirious, half defiant. The water trembles with every labored breath. I am Hercules, he whispers. I cannot die. Outside the chamber, the conspirators wait. Laetus and Eclectus exchange a single glance. Then Laetus nods once, the signal. A shadow steps forward from the torchlight. Narcissus, the emperor's own wrestling partner, summoned not as entertainer, but executioner. His massive hands are steady, his face unreadable. He enters the chamber alone. Commodus, barely conscious, looks up. Recognition flickers in his eyes, disbelief, then terror. He opens his mouth to speak, but Narcissus moves swiftly, silently, like a lion striking prey. His hand seize the emperor's throat. The struggle is brief, violent, pitiful. Water splashes across marble. A golden goblet rolls across the floor. The room fills with the sound of choking. Then nothing. When it ends, the god of Rome lies still, his head tilted, his body half submerged in the bath. The steam curls around his face, softening it, a grotesque parody of peace. The palace is silent. Outside, fireworks crackle across the city as Rome celebrates the dawn of a new year. None know that their emperor lies dead, strangled by mortal hands. The conspirators enter quietly. Marcia stands over the body, her expression unreadable. She does not weep. She only whispers. At last Rome breathes. Laetus turns to Eclectus. "Burn his image," he says. "Burn the lists. Burn the name." But names, once carved into history, never truly burn. The god who believed himself immortal lies broken, water rippling gently around his open eyes. The empire he called eternal is already dividing, already forgetting. He wanted to be remembered as divine. History remembers him as deranged. He wanted immortality. He achieved infamy. Subscribe to Tale of History and witness how gods are unmade. Dawn breaks cold over the Palatine Hill. The first light of the new year touches Rome not with warmth, but with silence. The palace stands motionless, its corridors still dripping with the perfume of last night's feast, the torches burnt to stubs, the air stale with the ghost of wine and fear. In the emperor's chamber, the body lies where it fell. The bath water has cooled to gray, the surface broken only by the soft rise of steam. Commodus' eyes remain open, glassy, unfocused, staring toward the ceiling painted with stars he once called his own. The god of Rome is dead. And yet, Rome does not mourn. Word spreads with the first light, whispered through servants' quarters, down marble staircases, across the city streets. The Praetorians move quickly, sealing the palace gates. Within the hour, the Senate gathers, trembling with the memory of years spent bowing before madness and tasting, for the first time in a generation, the air of defiance. They sit beneath the gilded dome of the Curia and declare him what he always feared most, damnatio memoriae, condemned memory. His name is to be erased from every monument, every inscription, every coin. His statues are to be torn down, his likeness melted, his victories struck from record. The man who wanted to be eternal is banished from time itself. Hammers ring through the forum. Marble faces shatter. Chisels carve new silence where his name once stood. Even the walls that bore his decrees are scraped clean, as though stone itself recoils from remembering him. But for all their triumph, Rome's soul is hollow. The senators, now free to speak again, discover their voices sound strange after years of fear. Their words of righteousness echo through an empty hall. Outside, the people gather not in celebration, but in numb confusion. They have lived too long under spectacle, too long cheering for death, too long swallowing cruelty as entertainment. They do not yet know how to feel. The city that once ruled the world now stands like a drunk waking from delirium, unsure if the nightmare has ended or merely changed its name. In the barracks, the Praetorian Guard, the empire's supposed protectors, meet to decide the next emperor. Not by lineage, not by virtue, not by decree, but by price. They drag the imperial corpse away and wipe the floor clean, as if erasing the stain of divinity itself. Then they turn to the Senate and to the nobles and make their offer. The throne of Rome is for sale. And so, the world's greatest empire becomes a marketplace. The crown that once belonged to gods and conquerors now belongs to whoever can pay the most. By midday, the auction begins. In the shadow of the Colosseum, the same arena where Commodus drenched sand in blood, the Praetorians stand armored, silent, their faces hard and expressionless. Before them, two senators, two men desperate enough to buy eternity. Bidding begins. Not in whispers, but in open shouts. Gold, estates, promises of power. The throne rises in value like any other commodity. The guards nod to one, then the other, until the highest bid falls. The empire of laws, of legions, of gods is sold like livestock. The senators cheer, pretending this is justice. But beneath the marble and rhetoric lies something darker, the realization that the soul of Rome has already rotted. The republic's ideals, the empire's discipline, the gods' favor, all gone. What remains is transaction. The city once worshipped reason. Now it kneels to greed. By nightfall, a new emperor is declared. His name barely matters. Rome no longer remembers the difference between saviors and buyers. The people cry allegiance once more, their voices hollow, their eyes dull. In the streets where the statues of Commodus once stood lie fragments of marble, eyes without faces, hands without purpose, a crown split in two. The wind moves through them like breath through bones. Above it all, the sky burns crimson, as if the gods themselves watch the empire's ruin and say nothing. Rome has survived another tyrant, but it has not survived itself. The emperor of madness is gone, but the madness he birthed remains, in the hearts of those who cheered, who bowed, who learned to live without truth. The empire of marble is now an empire of ash. And somewhere in the silence between torchlight and dawn, the echo of a strangled laugh still lingers, the sound of a god dying in the bath, and an empire following him into oblivion. Subscribe to Tale of History, and remember, power does not vanish when tyrants fall. It only waits for the next man to believe he deserves to be a god. Rome believed it could outlive its sins, but the shadow Commodus cast did not die with him. It lingered in the marble, in the dust, in the very rhythm of the empire's heart. For Rome had not birthed a monster by accident. It had cultivated him, fed him on its pride, its vanity, its addiction to spectacle. It had raised him on applause and blood, then pretended to recoil when he gave it exactly what it craved. He was not the sickness. He was the symptom. Every cry that once hailed him in the arena, every senator who bowed in trembling obedience, every merchant who minted his name on coins, they were all part of the same design. The empire did not stumble into madness. It wanted it. It adored its reflection too deeply to notice when that reflection began to grin back. The philosopher's Rome, the Rome of reason, of stoic virtue, of Marcus Aurelius, had rotted from the inside long before Commodus took the throne. He merely tore away the mask. What the people saw in him was not a god, nor a tyrant, but a mirror, a gleaming, blood-slick mirror that showed them what they had become. The city that once worshipped logic had fallen in love with performance. Truth no longer mattered. Only the illusion of power did. The people who once listened to orators in the forum now crowded the amphitheater to watch throats opened in honor of their emperor's amusement. They mistook cruelty for strength, chaos for divine will, madness for leadership. And in that mistake, Rome sealed its fate. The shadow of Commodus outlived his body. It crept into every palace that followed, every emperor who sought not to serve but to be adored. It whispered to generals who mistook conquest for immortality, to senators who traded principle for privilege, to the mob who clapped for every execution and called it justice. His ghost did not haunt Rome in spirit. It haunted her in imitation. Long after his statues were smashed and his name erased, others rose in his image, not as gods, but as men pretending to be. The cycle of self-worship continued, each reign dressing its corruption in new marble, new rhetoric, new blood. Rome had forgotten that no empire dies in a single night. It decays one applause at a time. The same fire that burned in Commodus, that blind hunger for control, for worship, for eternal recognition, burns still, hidden beneath the crowns and governments that came after. It lives in the echo of every leader who demands love instead of respect, in every crowd that cheers what it should condemn, in every citizen who looks away when power feasts on the weak. The shadow of madness stretches beyond the Palatine Hill. It stretches into every age that forgets how easily civilization can collapse into theater, how quickly gods become men, and men become monsters. Rome thought it destroyed its tyrant. In truth, it buried a seed, and that seed would bloom again, in other cities, under other names, wearing other crowns. The story of Commodus is not ancient. It is eternal, because every empire that worships itself breeds its own Commodus. Every age that confuses strength with cruelty, that trades justice for spectacle, that calls obedience virtue, writes his name again in the dust. And if you listen closely, beyond the ruins, beyond the silence of history's marble tombs, you can still hear him. The laughter of a man who called himself a god, echoing through centuries, mocking every empire that thought itself immortal. Subscribe to Tale of History, because the fall of Rome was not an ending. It was a warning, and it's still being written. The centuries have passed, and Rome sleeps beneath its own ruins. The wind moves through the arches of the Colosseum like breath through the ribs of a fallen giant. Once, it trembled with the cries of beasts and men, with the chanting of crowds who mistook slaughter for glory. Now only dust answers. The sand of the arena lies still, pale, cracked, and brittle beneath the sun. The blood that once darkened it has long faded into the earth, but memory stains deeper than color. Each gust of wind stirs the ghosts. You can almost hear them, the clash of blades, the scream before the silence, the thunder of applause echoing from stone to sky. Above it all, shadows move where statues once stood. Their faces are gone, chipped away by time and vengeance. Among them was once the likeness of a man who called himself divine, his name carved across the empire, his image raised beside the gods. Now nothing remains but fragments, a broken nose, a hollow, a crown cracked in two. The Colosseum has forgotten his voice, but not his echo. When the sun sets, the walls turn red again, as if the stones themselves remember. The arena, that theater of blood, keeps its silence by day, but whispers by night. And if you stand long enough, you can almost hear the faintest laughter, hollow, distant, mocking. The laughter of a man who mistook fear for faith. Commodus' temples are gone, his statues dismantled, his name cursed and struck from every inscription. The Senate that once trembled before him declared his memory forbidden, and yet, in trying to erase him, they made him eternal. For Rome cannot hide what it created. He survives not in marble or myth, but in the warning his story became, a caution carved into history's conscience. He was the emperor who murdered the idea of Rome itself, who proved that no empire falls from the outside until it first collapses within. The gods he claimed as his brothers turned their faces from him. The people who once called him divine spat upon his corpse. The city that once crowned him savior sold his throne for silver. And still he lingers, not as a god, not as a man, but as a mirror. Every civilization that comes after finds its reflection in him, its hunger for spectacle, its worship of power, its blindness to decay. Commodus' name no longer rings through the marble halls of Rome, but through the lessons of every empire that rose and fell after him. He is the whisper that follows power, the reminder that worship without conscience becomes rot, and fear mistaken for divinity becomes ruin. Walk through the ruins of the Colosseum, and the air still hums with that truth. The stones that once trembled under the weight of thousands now bear only the footsteps of travelers and the dust of centuries. But the ghosts are not gone. They wait, watching, warning, whispering the same story, that the fall of gods begins with applause. He called himself Hercules reborn. He called himself Lord and God. But time has no need for gods that bleed. The empire that raised him is dust. The monuments that praised him are bones of stone. The people who feared him are long buried beneath the city he defiled. And all that remains of his glory is an echo, faint, fading, but never gone. He called himself a god. But even gods drown in their own reflection. He was the emperor who thought himself immortal. Now, even his name bleeds into dust. Don't let history's monsters die twice. Subscribe to Tale of History, where memory is the only empire that endures.